The Vorka tore through the upper atmosphere, its immense hull glowing like a descending meteor. The Zarkalians, a race hardened by the merciless gravity of their homeworld, stood in disciplined formation aboard the bridge, eyes locked on the blue-green sphere below. They had crushed planets with superior strength and tactical dominance, and Earth was expected to be no different. Commander Chkrell watched the data stream across the monitors. Atmospheric composition, nitrogen-oxygen, standard gravity, weak electromagnetic defenses. Nothing unexpected. He straightened his armored frame, his dark exoskeleton gleaming under the bridge lights. Prepare for planetary descent. Humanity will kneel before nightfall. The vessel roared through the clouds, its arrival shaking the very ground beneath. A crackling energy field dissipated as landing struts deployed, embedding deep into the soil. Dust spiraled into the air as an entire Zarkalian platoon marched down the extended ramp, their bladed armor catching the early morning sunlight. Weapons at the ready, they awaited the first sign of resistance. Instead, they found indifference. A man in a khaki uniform stood a few dozen meters away, arms crossed. He squinted at the invaders, unimpressed, as if they were merely an inconvenience. His boots scuffed at the ground. Then, in the most casual tone possible, he said, "Yeah, hi. So you folks lost or something?" Chkrell narrowed his eyes. "You stand before the might of the Zarkalian Dominion, the most feared force in the galaxy. Surrender now, or your people shall suffer." The human, his uniform indicated the rank of sergeant, exhaled through his nose. "Right, okay, see, the thing is I just got my coffee, and you guys are kind of blocking the sun. So, I'm going to need you to move." Behind him, a handful of soldiers watched with mild interest, one of them taking a slow bite of an apple. Chkrell's mandibles clenched. No raised weapons, no signs of panic. Did they not comprehend the threat before them? Chkrell lifted a single-clawed hand. At his signal, the Zarkalian warriors advanced, weapons humming with lethal energy. The humans did not flinch. One of them even pulled out a small rectangular device and muttered, "Holy crap, this is going to go viral." Frustration flared in Chkrell's chest. He signaled again. A massive Zarkalian enforcer stepped forward, towering over the sergeant. The alien's plated arms flexed, his deep-set eyes glowing with the promise of violence. "I will crush you where you stand, soft creature." The sergeant stared up at the warrior, expression unreadable. Then, with a slow nod, he rolled his shoulders and stepped forward. "All right, sure. We'll do this the old-fashioned way." The moment stretched. Then the enforcer lunged. It should have been a massacre, but it wasn't. The sergeant ducked, twisted, and before the enforcer could react, drove his boot into the alien's shin. The warrior stumbled, momentarily unbalanced. A heartbeat later, the human pivoted, slammed an elbow into the enforcer's side, and sent him sprawling into the dust. Silence. Chkrell's eyes flickered with disbelief. He had expected a slaughter. Instead, one of the greatest warriors of the Zarkalian Dominion lay groaning in the dirt, defeated in mere seconds by a single unarmored human. The sergeant dusted off his sleeve. Well, that was embarrassing. The soldiers behind him erupted into cheers. One clapped the sergeant on the back. Another shouted, "Yo, someone call Joe Rogan. We got a new UFC champ." Chkrell clenched his fists. This was wrong. These creatures were not behaving as expected. Where was the fear? The submission? Why do they mock their own enemies? He signaled for another warrior. A second Zarkalian stepped forward, his movements slower, more calculated. Chkrell studied the human carefully now. Their kind was not built for direct combat. Too soft, too fragile. And yet, the second warrior attacked. The human sidestepped, grabbed the alien's arm, and twisted. There was a sharp pop. The warrior howled, staggering backward, his limb rendered useless. The crowd of soldiers gasped, then erupted into laughter. One even pulled out his phone. "Oh man, this is going everywhere." Chkrell's mandibles twitched. These creatures, they laughed in the face of combat. Enough. His voice cut through the commotion. His warriors hesitated, glancing at him. These things are not a threat. They are entertainers. Their antics are distractions. The sergeant took a slow sip of coffee. You know I can hear you, right? Shkrel ignored him. We take the city. They will learn what it means to defy the Dominion. His soldiers moved in formation, stepping past the fallen warriors. And yet, something gnawed at Shkrel's mind. This had not gone as planned. The combat, the reaction, the sheer casual defiance, it all reeked of something he could not yet name. The humans were different, and that unsettled him. Then, a voice called out, stopping them in their tracks. Hey, real quick. The sergeant pointed to the horizon. You might want to, look up. Shkrel turned, eyes narrowing. A dark shape streaked across the sky. Then another, and another. Earth's response had arrived. In the distance, aircraft swarmed like metal hornets, sleek and lethal. Tactical teams emerged from hidden positions, weapons primed, eyes sharp. It was not a panic defense. It was precise, coordinated, ready. The trap had been set before the Vorka even landed. Shkrel felt the first inkling of unease tighten in his chest. The humans hadn't been afraid. They had been waiting. The Zarkalian warriors stood rigid inside the transport vessel as it sliced through Earth's atmosphere once more. Commander Shkrel's mandibles clicked in irritation. The previous encounter with the humans had not gone as expected. Their lack of fear, their infuriating ease in the face of confrontation, it had unsettled him. But Shkrel refused to let that shake his resolve. A species could mask their weaknesses with bravado, but their world would reveal the truth. This time, they would not test humanity through combat. They would test its environment. The ship touched down in a remote sector far from the human cities, a land of untamed wilderness. The moment the hatch opened, a wave of thick, stifling heat rolled in. The Zarkalians, evolved to withstand the crushing gravity of their own volatile world, rarely struggled with external conditions. But as they stepped out onto the strange, dry terrain, something felt wrong. Temperature is within tolerable range, muttered Subcommander Voksh, checking his wrist device. He adjusted his armor, uncomfortable. Yet this air, it feels thick. Shkrel inhaled, feeling the strange oxygen saturation flood his system. Too much of it. It made him lightheaded. The gravity was weaker than their homeworlds, yet somehow, moving through this space felt unnatural. The humans thrive in this, one of the warriors muttered, adjusting the filtration vents in his helmet. A sound rustled in the brush. The squad snapped to attention, weapons raised. Shkrel narrowed his gaze at the approaching figure. Not human. It stood on two legs, feathered but flightless, its beady eyes unblinking. A mere creature. Harmless. Then it moved. The beast lunged with unnatural speed, talons raking the air. A Zarkalian barely had time to react before the creature struck, slashing through his armor with terrifying ease. He stumbled back, ichor seeping from the deep gashes along his plated chest. The warriors scrambled, weapons discharging in a panic. The creature dodged with impossible agility, zigzagging like a trained predator. It kicked again, sending another warrior sprawling. Shkrel's mind raced. This was no apex predator. It was small, not much larger than a human. It was attacking them with the precision of a war beast. And the way it moved, it was accustomed to prey that fought back. Asterisk kill it. Asterisk he barked. The next blast found its mark. The creature tumbled to the ground, twitching once before lying still. Silence fell over the squad. Then, a voice crackled over their comms. One of the scouts, his breathing ragged. "Commander," he gasped. "This place, it's crawling with them." Shkrel turned, eyes narrowing at the distant tree line. More figures lurked there, watching. This world had predators. Many of them. The group retreated to higher ground, scanning the terrain. The heat bore down on them, each breath more labored than the last. Something was wrong. Zarkalians did not tire easily. Their bodies were built for endurance. And yet, here on Earth, they felt sluggish, their movements heavier than they should have been. "Sir," Voksh said, concern creeping into his voice. "The oxygen levels, they're affecting us." Shkrel clenched his fists. How? The planet had weaker gravity. It should have been easier to move to fight. And yet, It was as if the air itself was a trap, a constant strain on their system. A distant rumble caught his attention. The wind shifted. The sky darkened. A wall of roiling clouds surged toward them, swallowing the horizon in an ominous swirl of gray and black. The air thickened with moisture, static energy prickling against their skin. Shkrel had seen storms before, but nothing like this. Weather anomaly approaching, one of the warriors reported. His voice held an edge of uncertainty. The first gust hit them like a physical force. The second nearly knocked them off their feet. Then the rain came. Not the gentle drizzle of a minor climate fluctuation. Not the acidic downpours of their homeworld. This was something else. The sky roared, water slamming into them like a relentless barrage. The wind howled, carrying debris, twisting trees as if they were mere twigs. Shkrel braced against the gale. "Regroup," he commanded, but his voice was swallowed by the storm. Lightning split the sky, striking the ground with terrifying force. One of the warriors let out a cry as the shock wave sent him sprawling. The ground beneath their feet turned to mud in seconds, swallowing their boots, making movement even more arduous. "This is impossible," Voksh growled, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. "How do the humans survive this?" Shkrel had no answer. They had invaded war-torn planets, survived in hospitable wastelands. But here, on a planet that humans inhabited without armor, without exoskeletal protection, they were struggling to simply exist. And then, just as suddenly as it had arrived, the storm began to wane. The rain lessened. The wind softened. The clouds dissipated. The Zarkalian stood there, drenched, battered, shaken. Shkrel turned his gaze skyward. The storm had passed in mere minutes, yet it had left its mark, reshaping the land as though it had willed destruction upon them for daring to set foot here. The humans had said nothing of this. They had not warned them, because to them, this was normal. A slow, creeping dread settled in Shkrel's gut. The humans were not just resilient. They were forged in this chaos. Their enemy was not a race of weaklings. They were a species that thrived where others perished. And worse, they found it amusing. Shkrel had seen the recordings from their human encounters. The way they had laughed when they fought. The way they joked in the face of danger. It had seemed like arrogance. A psychological strategy. But now, standing here, soaked and exhausted, the realization hit him like a physical blow. The humans weren't pretending. This was just another day to them. His communicator crackled to life. The voice on the other end was distorted, but recognizable. The human sergeant. "Hey, how's the field trip going?" Shkrel didn't answer. He couldn't, because for the first time since he had set foot on this wretched planet, he felt something alien, something unnatural coil in his chest. Doubt. The Vorkaz's hull groaned as it ascended through the turbulent upper atmosphere, its engines burning at maximum output. Inside the command chamber, Shkrel stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the screens displaying Earth shrinking beneath them. He had come here expecting a conquest. Instead, he was leaving with something far worse than defeat, uncertainty. He had underestimated them. Humanity was not an anomaly because of its advanced weaponry or technological prowess. The true danger lay in their world itself. Earth was not a paradise, not a world of delicate creatures awaiting subjugation. It was a crucible of relentless force that shaped its inhabitants into something that should not have been possible. His warriors, battle-hardened and conditioned for war, had been broken by it. Not by soldiers, not by a fleet, by the very land, the air, the creatures that roamed without fear. By storms that raged and vanished in the span of moments. By the sheer absurdity of how effortlessly the humans endured it all. Voksh stepped forward, his posture stiff, his usual confidence frayed at the edges. "Commander, the crew is unsettled." He hesitated, the admission itself a stain upon their honor. "Morale has never been this low." Shkrel did not reply. He knew. He had seen it in their eyes the moment they retreated. Zarkalians were warriors, unyielding. Yet Earth had done something no enemy had before. It had made them question their own strength. The silence was broken by the arrival of a transmission. The human sergeant's face flickered onto the primary screen. He was seated casually, a steaming mug in hand, the golden light of Earth's sun illuminating his features. "So, you heading out already?" His voice was laced with amusement, but not cruelty. Shkrel's mandibles clicked. "Your world is inhospitable." The sergeant smirked. "Yeah, bit of a nightmare, huh?" He took a slow sip of whatever dark liquid filled his cup. "You guys lasted longer than some of the other visitors, I'll give you that." Shkrel narrowed his eyes. "Others?" The human nodded, tapping his fingers idly against his cup. "Oh yeah, you think you're the first ones to drop by, all full of confidence." He leaned forward slightly. "There was a species a few years back, real tough, covered in chitin, had an empire that spanned 3 systems. They lasted about a week before their lungs gave out. Turns out, Earth air didn't agree with them." He grinned. "And don't get me started on the ones that couldn't handle our water. Had a whole fleet show up once. They took one drink, dropped dead on the spot." Shkrel stiffened. He had assumed humanity was new to interstellar encounters, that Earth had remained hidden from the larger conflicts of the galaxy. "But if this was true, you fought others before?" he asked carefully. The sergeant tilted his head. "Not fought exactly. More like watched them try to handle a Tuesday in Florida." He chuckled, shaking his head. "It's not personal. It's just Earth. That name again. That cursed, misleading name. A world of death wrapped in beauty, disguised as something soft, when in reality, it was the hardest battlefield Shkrel had ever encountered." His mind reeled with the implications. If other species had come before, and humanity still stood, unchanged, unbroken, what did that mean for the future? What did that mean for the Dominion? His claws curled into a fist. "You mock us." The sergeant raised an eyebrow. "No, man. I respect the hell out of you for even trying." He took another sip. "But let me ask you something, Commander. Do you really think your Dominion is ready for a war against a species that thrives in conditions others call uninhabitable?" Shkrel remained silent. The sergeant leaned back, his gaze steady. "You learned something here, didn't you?" Shkrel inhaled slowly, allowing himself, for the first time in his long career, to accept the truth. "We did." The human nodded, setting his mug down. "Then maybe you should ask yourself, if Earth was testing you, what does that say about the rest of the galaxy?" The transmission cut. For a long moment, Shkrel stood there, the hum of the ship's engines the only sound. Voksh shifted beside him. "What are your orders, Commander?" Shkrel exhaled. "Set a course for home." He turned from the screen, his mind racing with possibilities. The Zarkalians had conquered dozens of worlds, crushed countless civilizations beneath their might. But this planet, this Earth, it was different. Because Earth did not surrender. It simply waited.